So Craig, good morning. How are you, sir? Hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the introduction. Just quick background. I apologize I didn't give Jason a big bio. Broadwing is a commercial real estate advisory and brokerage company. We focus on helping organizations align their real estate to their operational and strategic needs. It's just quick background on who we are and what we do. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk just generally about the market, the office market. That's our focus today. And please change. Okay, come on. Forward. All right, I'm going to stop share. For some reason, it's not moving forward. Give me a second. Let's try that again. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes, we are seeing the screen.
All right, sorry. I'm going to try something different.
Technology is our best friend.
I don't know why it's not. It was
It takes a
advancing.
while. Ann and I could just do a series of duets for the rest of the
That's dangerous.
Well, we can see it now, and sometimes if you do it just not by doing the slideshow, we've had it work better for people. So
Yep.
we see it now.
Okay. Well, I will try and. There we go. I apologize for the slideshow on the left, but that's okay. Jumping right in, I did the introduction. Thank you, Jason. We're going to cover the macro office market, what's happening across Dane County. Then I'll dive a little deeper into downtown and what the trends are. And then long-term, where are the trends and where are we going? To start, I always like to kind of give a perspective of where our office market is. Downtown, obviously in the central, and the way we track data, the brokerage community tracks data is sort of east, south, far west, and central. For perspective, our kind of the square up out to Park Street and out to the river consists of about 4.5 million square feet. Jumping into the detail of the market itself. So our overall market consists of 17.7 million square feet. That's grown from a little over 12 million square feet in 2001 when I moved here. The last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years have been very healthy office market. Anything under 12% is considered what's called a landlord market, and where the landlord has a little bit more power in terms of dictating rates and where things are going. And the market has been very healthy as the economy has grown. We see variations here and there, but in general, anything under 12 is healthy. In the last 12 months, we have had a 4% jump in vacancy, and obviously pandemic related. So this is sort of the demand side of the equation, and the supply side, we measure absorption. Absorption is how much new space is coming onto the market or leased versus how much new space is coming off of the market. And absorption and vacancy don't match exactly, but they mirror each other. As you can see in the last year, transactional volumes dropped. 760,000 square feet hit the market since the beginning of March last year. That represents about 2.5 years of growth. I showed these two buildings because they're kind of interesting in the fact that Baker Tilly moved out of 130,000 feet and moved into about 110,000 square feet. So that's a net loss of absorption of 20,000 feet just in the outline I provided. Going a little deeper, how much space is available and where, and this is just spaces greater than 15,000 square feet. I do want to pop up and add one more thing. Sublease activity is another indication of how the market's doing. And about a year ago, there were 7 subleases averaging about 6,000 square feet. Today, there are 17 averaging 15,000 square feet. So companies are looking at shedding square footage and cost across all of Dane County. Jumping forward, where are the spaces and what's going on? Well, this kind of outlines the amount of large blocks of space that have come on the market. The macro numbers show the vacancy overall. This shows like what bigger users are doing, and bigger users tend to be more efficient. And we're just seeing weak demand. There are a couple tenants in the market, but there were probably half dozen eight active transactions in the suburbs in March of last year. There are three today. So it just gives you a sense of what the market is doing. And what that means is you should start to expect to see landlords start to offer concessions, and that's going to be specific to the market and what you're competing with. There may be some need for capital, especially in Class C where they're struggling, and there may be some troubled assets on the horizon in office. We think that's going to most likely happen in Class C. So downtown, what's going on downtown? Well, downtown is mirroring the overall. Again, a map for just perspective of where the office assets basically sit. And we have seen a 5% rise in vacancy downtown. And I broke down the classes in terms of where they are. For perspective, Class A and Class B represents just over 4 million square feet. The Sears Tower in Chicago is 4.3 million square feet. So we have a very small insular market. While this represents about 200,000 square feet that's come on the market, it's not a huge amount of space, and one tenant can shift that very, very quickly. So I'm pretty optimistic about where downtown office vacancy. I don't see it, if you think of a curve, it's relatively a soft curve on the downside. I think our suburban market mirrors more the national markets and what we're seeing trend-wise. So, and I'm going to dive into a little deeper where I see this going, but I wanted to touch base on downtown. That 5% may be alarming, but it's not. It's if I saw it up 10%, then I would say something more fundamental with downtown. And the Class A side of the market is actually, there are only a few spaces, larger blocks of spaces. And I think downtown's, and I'll dive a little deeper on this in a minute, but I think downtown's real challenge will be, how do we keep the tenants and not lose them to the suburbs where there's going to be probably greater value. So a little deeper on where our market is going, looking forward. As you see, vacancy has risen 4%. I cannot predict what that looks like, because in a typical recession, it takes about a year for the downturn to start to affect rates, which is about where we are right now. And we're just starting to see landlords start to be a little more aggressive, especially in the suburbs. There are national prognosticators that 2023, 2024, before the overall market improves, you should expect to see a flight to quality, which is means tenants moving from C to B and B to A in terms of quality. A lot of that has to do with rates dropping. I put the John Deere building on as an example of what the pandemic has sort of indicated and accelerated for corporate users. This is a 95,000 square foot, 2-building complex. They are selling it and downsizing significantly, basically by 1/5. They don't need their office building in this amount. So they've decided to sell this. And basically mobility, the work from home, productivity, location, design, everything is going to drive sort of how office real estate is impacted over the next several years. And even law firms, who I never thought I'd say this, are looking at ways in which they may not need growth space, their organic growth may not accelerate, because their millennial generation may be more comfortable with a shared office where they work 2 days a week at home. Even boomers are, I've talked to numerous attorneys that are very, very productive at home. So what does that impact on real estate? Real estate is typically the second highest cost to most companies on their P&L. So how does that affect how they look at office real estate? Diving a little deeper, what's going on? And I showed this slide at Nosh at noon, but it's a good slide to look at the way employees think of this. This first slide on the pre-pandemic is really where office workers were housed pre-pandemic, and the middle hybrid is 1 to 4 days a week. So don't that's not anything, that's the devil in the detail. This was a survey done by some of the national firms in early summer, late May of last year, where do you want to be post-pandemic? And they said 44% back at the office, 44% hybrid, 12% at home all the time. As you see, those numbers have dropped, where at the office numbers have actually dropped. The hybrid has increased. And what's also fascinating is people are saying, you know, the home environment is great up to a point, but I don't want to be there full time. I miss my teams. I miss working with people. And the key question, the kind of predominant survey of users is the employer wants their employee in the office 3 days a week. The employee wants to be home 3 days a week. And that's really where the devil in the detail is on how you manage remote teams. What's the technology? If you have two team members at home and they're dialing in on Zoom, are you set up for that? What does that look like? That's the dynamic that I think is going to be, we do these Zooms, but are the breakout rooms, the huddle rooms set up to do a Zoom meeting? And what does that look like? So where is the continuum? And I showed this slide last week at NASH at noon, but I just think it's really telling of how to think of the way companies will look at their long-term solution. Are they going to be office-centric, or are they going to be more remote virtual? And it varies. There are technology firms out there that are completely virtual, and there are other technology firms that want to basically bring their whole teams back. So that's why I did this bar. We're generally seeing a trend to moving more hybrid. So that's why the bars all reach to the right. And the only thing data, I cannot find any data on either nationally or locally, is what are states doing with their footprints. And so that's why it's still a question. I think this is an important question for downtown. I know there's some people on the call that have a long history with keeping the state of Wisconsin downtown. And I think that's an important thing that as a community we should consider, because those are a lot of employees. The state has a fairly significant footprint, and those are important for our downtown and being successful. The last thing I want to show is where, and I touched on this earlier, how our workplace is going to change. And this was a survey done by Cornett and Cushman Wakefield that came out last week of where pre-pandemic, how were individual spaces organized, and post-pandemic, how it is. Don't take these percentages as actual, because every company will be I don't believe a law firm space will create something like this, but they will move more to more collaborative spaces relative to their percentage. If they have 90% individual spaces, they may add a little more. But technology firms might go much more dramatic and might go down to 20%. So it's just an example of where things are going overall. I don't believe office real estate is going away by any stretch. I just think it's going to look very different. And what's really interesting is the data of where companies are in deciding what remote work looks like. Only 24% of companies have actually announced a formal remote work policy. There's another about 25 to 30% that have a pretty good idea, but they haven't announced it. And everybody else is still trying to work through their data on what is best practice. The one really silly but kind of telling thing is what it looks like 6 months from now will look very different 6 months later, because companies will learn what works and what doesn't work. And real estate will continue to change. I think that's the fundamental reason why the prognosticators think it's going to be 2023 to 2024 before we really understand, and the office market will improve. The next 12 to 18 months will determine what this mix looks like, and how this future workplace box impacts their overall footprint, and what that means for downtown Madison. I'm going to go back to this slide. We are very insular. That 4 million to comparison to Sears Tower is a relatively small market. We have some very stable firms downtown. I think we should focus on a hub and spoke, where downtown becomes a hub for companies that are national, that want all the amenities, that third space that downtown offers. And I think keeping certain firms' footprints downtown is important, even if they decide to do a more remote workplace. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I welcome other people's input. This is all a work in progress in terms of the understanding of what's going on there, and anecdotal stories help weave together what's important. So I'll slide to this, but I can slide to any slide if you want.
Excellent, Craig. Thank you very much for the presentation. We want this to be a discussion because I think all of us have a vested interest in this topic here today. We're going to go with an first person we're going to call on with an old school raising of the hand. I like it. Jeff Tubbs. Good morning, Jeff. How are you?
Good morning, Jason. I'm good. Good morning, Craig. Thanks for the presentation. Say, when you're going through all your surveys and your analysis, I was wondering, did you come across anything that talked about the ripple effect of the work from home? You know, what does that ultimately mean? Not just a office space, but public transportation, the retail, the bars, restaurants, things like that. Any comment you got in that regard, Craig?
Well, there's not a ton of data, but what's really interesting was some data that I got from, which is an ironic thing, but data I got from somebody at Adams Outdoor during month 2 or 3 of the pandemic. And they tracked cell phone data and where cell phone is going, and they saw more traffic in front of their billboards kind of in May and June than they fully expected. People were at home, but they were out and about, traveling, going, doing whatever errands they had during the day. So the question is, I actually think retail, some types of retail will do better in a post environment. I think there'll be winners and losers like there always are in retail, but I think that was, to me, the most telling data of what is going on in the industry. Now that's anecdotal. I don't have great data beyond the ripple effect. Other than, if you think of nodes of development and whether it's housing or office, retail is always a support mechanism. Housing and office, how do the bus rapid transit, how is that impacted? And I think we need to think not only about office and the workers, but also residential and how they're getting around from place to place.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Craig. Next up, we have Ron. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning. Thank you, Craig. I have 2 questions if I could sneak in too. One would be, I think we all know that Urban Land Interests is in the midst of leasing up its American Exchange Bank project, and I was wondering to what extent your data reflects that space. And number 2 of questions would be, with the isthmus, we're kind of landlocked. What capacity do we have to actually increase office space downtown over a period of the next 10 or 20 years with the scarcity of land on the isthmus?
Ron, thank you. First, to answer your first question, and it's a technical thing that I didn't explain well. The surveys we do are for existing space only. It does not take in proposed or under construction space. So anything urban land or any of the other developers downtown that have talked about office space, it doesn't take into account any of that. Even SWIB and their pending move and what's going to happen with their building is not taken into effect in these numbers yet, because it's still uncertain what that building, if it's actually formally being leased or not. So existing space only. In terms of landlock, it's really pretty basic, and it comes down to economics. Office users tend to be pretty commodity driven. It's really about their P&L and what is their rent to revenue ratio relative to their profitability. And they'll look at those numbers and say what makes sense relative to their profitability. So when you look at new construction downtown, and what you can compete for relative to, say, suburban greenfield sites, it has a lot to do with, can you charge the premium that downtown costs and the cost to build and the cost of parking, which is the other really big factor. And what people don't know yet, and I think this is going to take longer, is the mobility and how parking is impacted. I know all the landlords, I don't need to ask them. They've seen a significant drop in their parking income over the last 12 months. I don't know if anybody, Ann or I saw Sue on the phone relative to Mullins, whether they have any predictions on what parking income will do long term. That it may actually go up because of greater mobility and more people coming in and out, but it may go down just because there are less people in the office. And I just can't predict it right now. It's too early. I hope that answers your question, Ron.
I'm happy to chime in about parking, and I bet Sue is as well. You know, I think there's a lot of wait and see still on parking. Our parking at urban land interest properties has not rebounded, though the trend is continuing to go up in terms of demand for that parking. One thing that I'm hearing, Craig, from tenants is that they plan to use their spaces as spaces where people really do come together. So converting the opposite of what I would think of converting bigger spaces to private offices, they're converting private offices to bigger spaces for people to truly collaborate, so that when they're at home, they're working independently. When they're in the office, they're collaborating, and those spaces are designed specifically for that. And that's going to be interesting with parking, because then you might get these surges that are a little different than your all day in the office parking. So I think technology in parking has been, you know, people have been investing in a lot more technology for their parking facilities. And I think we're going to continue to have to do that to manage the changing demands during these peaks. I don't know if you're hearing that same collaboration space versus private office switch with what you're doing, Craig. Is that a trend?
It's absolutely a trend, and it relates specifically to this slide. And Ann, you're outlining exactly what this slide really represents. Is if you think, let's say team A, B, and D come in on a Wednesday, and those teams are big, you have to create the collaborative spaces for those teams to come in, and that flexibility of those collaborative spaces, they may double as an office one day and a huddle room the next, depending on as a hotel huddle room one day and a hotel office the next, based on the demand and how spaces are designed differently. So that's really why I left this slide as last, because I see office design. And you know, there's some architects, I saw somebody from Potter Lawson on, but there's some architects on the call that could probably address this as well. There's the interaction of what's going on in the office real estate are so related. I really say it starts with HR and how companies define their culture and how their teams are organized and how remote teams are organized. Then it's going to shift to how you design your space. Then the real estate decisions get made. We're kind of on the tail end, and I'm just reporting data on where the trend is, but you sort of have to figure out the HR and the design, which is going to drive parking, square footage, everything else.
Rebecca, I see you nodding. Is there anything you want to add or echo? Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. I think, Craig, we've talked about this a lot. I think you're spot on. And I think, you know, early on we were hearing, well, if I shrink my workforce by 10%, that means I shrink my workspace by 10% square footage wise. And it's not at all a direct correlation. In fact, you need more collaboration spaces, but it is client by client. We're running a lot of clients through programming right now and realizing they're wading through their policies. Yes, exactly. So it's there isn't a clear answer for everyone, but it's, you know, we're helping everyone wade through it case by case basis.
Lots of pilots out there, companies looking at pilots areas on how to figure this out, because real estate can be a very expensive, and you know, there's some companies that are making very extreme moves. It's like, we're going to shift you all to home. And I think you're going to see a rebound of what's the right balance. And every company is different. Every organization is different on what works for them. Sue, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, just I agree with everything that's been said. I don't think we truly know yet exactly how it's all gonna fall out. And I think so many companies are also waiting to see if there's another variant issue, you know, whether we're going to be done with this or what. And the one thing that does surprise me is not going to more distancing of workspaces and the open space, the collaboration because of that. And I agree with you, Craig, we're going to the collaboration, but that was one thing I was surprised at seeing. Relative to the state, one thing I do know is that UW's system has actually eliminated some of their leases of office space and consolidate it into another building because they're going to allow a number of their employees to work from home. I have not seen an official edict from the state yet, but we have already been losing employees downtown because the state has been moving agencies to hill farms. And yeah, you know, the policy to consolidate and stay downtown does not exist anymore. There's not that political support for it, unfortunately. I don't know. I don't think we can turn it around at this point, but that trend has already occurred.
And just in general, larger companies tend to be more efficient and sophisticated in their view of this, and they create policies. Smaller companies, you know, if you're in 3,000 feet, are you really going to shed 20% of your square footage? It's a lot harder to do that. So smaller organizations with smaller footprints don't tend to make those changes as dramatically as a larger company might. Like an insurance company, there's an insurance company in town that their claims benefit, pre-pandemic, they were about 33% work from home. They expect that group to go to almost 60%. But they were sort of on the cutting edge and in advance of that. So it's going to vary. I think that's why the suburban numbers, you'll see more holes in the suburban numbers in general, because we have less bigger users. And I mean bigger by north of 50,000 feet. We have less of those downtown than we do in the suburbs.
One of the other things I wonder about, I don't know if you have any trends. I mean, I know that employers and employees are asking about air quality within buildings, that, you know, your whole mechanical system, and with older buildings having to retrofit it, but also with the remodeling. Are employers going to be able to remodel in place, or are they going to think they have to move to a new place, depending on the extent of it? You know, that's a question in my mind.
So I know Ann will have some information on this, but I can speak on the air quality and sort of improvement of systems. I know the contractors, Findorf could certainly speak on this as well. Air quality and sort of sustainability and the workplace environment is critical to these things, and employees expect it. It was true before, but obviously the pandemic has hyper accelerated that in terms of air quality. And I'm sure somebody could give me an update on where ASHRAE, which is the air quality standards, are going forward. And Ann, I don't know, anything to add on that?
No, but what Craig's alluding to, and I think I've mentioned before in this meeting, and you've probably heard other folks at ULI touting, is our investment in the reverse ionization air purifying type of systems. And I'm sure whatever I see, some people are nodding, so I know I said most of that right. But we did make a big investment in that across our portfolio, and I know others in the commercial industry have as well. You know, I think that until people are back in the office and experiencing that and feeling the comfort of that, and we are seeing this extreme slow of spread, which we're seeing, it's hard because it's a hard thing to market when people still, it's not bringing them back, but I think when they come back, they're going to have more trust in that system. So I hope people come back and see that things are not spreading. I think people will come to expect it because enough buildings have done it now.
Sue, what was your second question? I apologize, I've forgotten. I didn't write it down.
My second question?
No, Sue Springman.
Sue's.
Sorry.
Well, we'll come back if we
I
remember.
think the second question was, can they remodel in place, or are they going to move to new space in order to remodel?
Thank you. That's the $64,000 question, and a lot of that will depend on where they are in the lease and how they can disrupt it. There is a major law firm that did a remodel in place, and I think what landlords will be able to do with a little more vacancy is they will allow tenants to remodel in place, and they'll play the sort of jigsaw. Part of a team will move down, they'll remodel an area, another team will move up. And there's a firm, Reinhardt did this specifically in their space, where they remodeled one floor. They had some extra space in another floor that the Mullins Group was able to accommodate and pivot around. I know it was painful while it was going on, but staying in place and having the same, and I'm sure Nathan can speak to the pain, but it can be done. It's just a question of economics and the logistics. You're on mute, Sue.
Sue, did you have something else, Sue?
No.
No. All right, good. Well, from my vantage point, Nathan's view looks quite good. So I see we have Nathan. Did you have a comment about that? And then I see Stacy. We have Stacy next, and then we'll go.
Yeah, I thought the process actually of staying located in the same place and moving around, while the day you moved was a little bit of a pain, it actually worked out really well. Findorf and Mullins really had the process go seamlessly for us, so it worked out great. You can see it behind me. Someday I'll go in and actually visit it in person.
Hopefully soon. We want everyone back downtown soon. Stacy was up next, followed by Ann.
Yeah, I was just going to make another comment following up to what Ann was saying about the, the air quality in buildings. Fiore also has done significant investment in our office buildings for either bipolar ionization or UV systems, depending on the building. And it's one of those things, we got very positive reactions from tenants, but then when it comes down to it, we get a lot of questions because it's not something that the employee can really see or prove. And so, they want to see data. So we've done we did testing before, we did testing after, but you need to be an HVAC engineer to really decipher the data and understand it. So it really becomes this very nebulous thing that is hard to market and hard to really get people on board with, and I've had a couple people say, you could just be lying to us. We don't know what we can't see it. We don't know if you really did it. And so it's one of those things. I'm glad we did it, and it's the right thing to do. And it was well worth the investment just in overall air quality, pandemic or no pandemic. It's a great thing to do for buildings, but it's difficult to explain and difficult to get kind of buy-in what difference it really makes in your workspace.
We're all from Missouri.
Yes, we need the show me.
Stacy, if it makes you feel any better, when I go into Caseta at least once a week, the air feels very fresh.
Excellent. I'm glad.
You can put that on your advertisements. Next up, we have Ann.
Fresh air and fresh bread. I was going to ask you, Craig, you said, I know there's a lot of talking out of all sides of our mouths in this time where we try to figure out where we're landing and what the truth is. But you mentioned both kind of real estate as commodity and the flight to quality. So is it quality? Is it a commodity? And how can downtown, and you're not going to be able to give a straight arrow through that, but for downtown, what do you see as the flight to quality? What kind of qualities should downtown be emphasizing in order to make it the preferred location for office space in the future?
Well, first on the flight to quality, happens more in down markets in the sense that tenants can upgrade their space with reduced rents. Now, well, I think there'll be a little softening in downtown. I don't think it's going to be dramatic because it's a relatively insular market compared to the suburbs. To your question on how to think about town, I think of downtown as a holistic, and I use the Sears Tower example as an example. If you think you got 4.3 million square feet, the amenities in the Sears Tower are obviously very robust, but you can walk out the front door and go a block and go to any amenity you want in downtown Chicago. In Madison, the same thing's true. And think of downtown as your amenity, and every single one of the landlords on this call all tout, we have XYZ. Jason talks about Caseta for Stacy. There's great things in the ULI buildings. The Mullins have great restaurants in their buildings. So every single landlord downtown has the benefit of things just out their front door or within a block. And I think we should continue to tout that as something that's important, because that's a value proposition that some of the traditional suburban buildings don't have. Now, not everybody values that, but that is that third space, and I call that collaborative space as well. Even though you may you may not design, you can go down to the coffee shop. And this is where I think you'll see retail users creating more common areas that people can rent out. If you have a corporate account at, I don't make up, at Collectivo, and they had, does the landlord partner with the retailer and create a sort of a shared space that both benefit from, and it allows the tenant to stay in place and they have more collaborative space. I mean, this is where we need to get more creative and use data to highlight downtown and the ability to because it's fun. We all miss it. My neighbor walked up to my wife and said, "Hey, are you vaccinated? Can I have a hug?" I mean, we all miss that stuff. So, and I do have to give a shout out to two of the parties who've now turned themselves off for the best home pet visits, Pam Christensen and Jenny Jeffress with their dog and their cat saying hello while they're on a Zoom. We all have had that. It's all awesome. So thank you.
Craig, I have a follow-up question to that, actually, about the idea of collaboration and third space downtown. I've read a couple of economists now say that some downtowns, particularly in downtowns that are based on sort of technology and creative businesses, like Madison can be, that they in fact need to be in these spaces where people are, that power of proximity, where they're coming together, that idea of the power of agglomeration. And not just the spaces, right? The great restaurants and the great, shops and Forward Madison and the Sylvie and Overture and all the rest. Those are fantastic as well. But they just actually need to have the connections and the frictions and the connections between different people. Is that advantageous? So pull that out. Is that helpful for downtown, particularly downtown Madison, moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. It's easy for us to only think about our own business, and I think that's an important thing that DMI can play a role, is how do we continue to make those connections among industries, and that's why there are industry groups. That's why the bar has an industry group, or HR has an industry group. It's to make those connections, and how do we do that? Continue to foster that as a downtown, and think about what downtown groups. The Downtowners is a great example of trying to bring people together. And I think the more we do that, the more we create that, whether it's technology, how do we include and create those connections? Because that's what makes downtown so special.
Got some more time for questions. If you have a question, you can either raise your hand, or a discussion point, you can raise your hand through the reaction function or send it in through the chat, or we could just wait for Foster or Silas to make an appearance on Pam and or Jenny's screen. Any other questions, discussion topics? Anne.
I was going to ask you, Jason, this friction of people coming together and sparking new ideas only happens, obviously, if people are there. What meetings are you seeing that are starting to happen in person? And I think that I walked my kid to school for the first time in a year today, and on the way, two people told me they needed office space, which was great. But that never would have happened had I not been on the street. But what do you see in terms of which events are starting to contemplate coming back downtown? Which companies are taking the lead and having meetings? And what are the trends that you're seeing, Jason, from the industries that are members of DMI? Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no. My job, I think I'm always on the spot with my job.
You're good on the spot.
Yes. Well, first of all, go walk your kids to school more often, because we could use more activity to get more tenants downtown. I think that's great news. But we are starting to see events come back. And I think it's really important that is happening, particularly outdoor events, right, in these big spaces. The Chamber Orchestra made their announcement that they're going to, they're not in the Capitol Square because they couldn't really control the amount of people that could go to the Capitol Square, but they are able to do that at Breeze. You only saw Frank Productions and the folks at Breeze Stevens, Forward Madison, the Mallards out early with their concert. I think it's May 7th or 8th. I don't have the date. Sold out like that. We heard that last week from Joel Plant at the What's Up Downtown breakfast. You're also starting to see groups. I know that the Hotel and Lodging Association had a meeting in a space downtown last week. DMI, we're having our first event with our folks at Findorf and US Bank in June at Breeze Stevens. And so things are starting to come back. The Chamber is running an event, and you can start to see this slowly and surely. The Farmers Market, another huge event for downtown. They are at Willow Island right now, but they have said over and over and over again that their home is downtown and that they want to be downtown. I think that's really an important statistic. And I think the last thing I'll end on is, this is all anecdotal, what I just told you, right? This all helps bring people back. But we are seeing the data actually say that more people are coming back downtown at a faster rate than we would have liked. We have the good fortune of working with an economist who retired economist here in town, who is really parsing through the pedestrian counters on the 100 through 600 blocks of State Street and on King Street. He had predicted sort of a slow rise back up. I mean, it just torpedoed down and then a slow rise back up. He is now seeing the data go up much more quickly. So there's more activities on all the blocks, right? Because the 100 block is very different than the 600 block and who is on those blocks. So these are all positive numbers for people coming back downtown. You know, you're hearing, mask mandates maybe going away outside. There's just a lot of things that are happening. More and more people getting vaccinated. We'll get more people downtown. Once we get more of the conferences and the business traveler downtown, that will make a huge difference, because our tourism economy is great for the leisure traveler, but it really is always and will be based on business travel. I see Rob Crane is on here, who's a chair of Destination Madison. He might have a word about, that part of bringing people back and what Ellie and the team at Destination Madison are seeing, because that is $300 million worth of business downtown and a lot of people. Rob, what are you seeing on the trends from tourism? I'm sorry, I'm just passing the buck and then calling on people, but sorry, Rob.
No problem, Jason. I'm always on the spot too. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to get out over the skis. I know the Destination Madison team is prepping a recovery plan that I think they're in the very near future going to be unveiling. I think we are starting to see, I don't want to call it significant uptick in activity, but in comparison to what it has been, it's a significant uptick in activity in terms of inquiries and especially for the second half of this year and into next year. So I think the signs of the tourism economy recovering are there, and so and I think, like you said, it's a 1-2 punch between the business recovery and the business meetings and those types of things as well, and quite honestly, just anecdotally, meetings like this and Destination Madison, we'll be sending out a survey to our board about meeting in person, and there's a strong optic there about you can do this safely, especially as people are getting vaccinated and what have you. So I think definitely the signs are pointing in a very positive direction.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I think that's true. We have to lead, and we're excited to have an event in June and see a lot more there moving forward. Next up, we have Bill Connors. Good morning, Bill.
Hey there. As a UW-Madison alum, I'm thinking, what's it going to be like in the fall at the UW-Madison? I don't know if they've made the announcement definitively, but if they're back in person in classes, people are living in apartments in the dorms instead of living in Massachusetts and just videoing in. Students spend a heck of a lot of money. And, if there's football games in person with crowds in the fall, bringing people downtown, to the campus, that's a tremendous kind of just shot in the arm for vitality in the area, I would think. I don't know if others have thoughts on that.
Yeah, Bill, that's a good point. 30,000 residents in downtown, and 84% of them are ages 15 to 34. That's a massive group. I think I saw it. Narek, did your hand go up, or maybe it went back down again?
I was just going to respond to Bill, since I'm a student at UW.
Absolutely.
So classes are officially in person for the fall, but of course, if things change over the summer, they'll let us know.
There we go. Good news. Thank you, Narek. Also, UW Athletics, they are moving forward with 100% in their athletic facilities. These are big time events. Every football game is $16 million in economic impact. So this is important. More questions for Craig. Ron, the old school.
Just to add to what Narek, the student, may have said, I saw an interview with President Thompson on Sunday where he said that they're going to be back to 75% in-person classes, and that's typically what the university does run. Usually 25% of their classes are online, and the intent is for all students to be vaccinated starting fall classes.
Thank you, Ron. Ann.
And one more question, Craig. I don't know if you're seeing where you think this trend is going, but obviously in the pandemic, some restaurants started to need more elbow room and started taking off our office floors, most notably Sushi Red. And I actually ate at it on Friday night and was kind of really surprised at how awesome it was to eat on an office floor and how well they did it, making it feel like a real restaurant experience. Do you think with, you mentioned like private dining between like a collectivo and a landlord, I mean, do you think that's long-term use for some of these partnerships, or is that super short-term, or
I would be surprised
do you
it's
see in other
long-term.
examples?
Yeah, I would be surprised it's long-term. I mean, you and I saw each other a week or so ago but I think it's a great creative way of thinking differently to help these restaurants survive. And, you know, if you've got idle space, I mean, frankly, that building, it's a great way of thinking differently in that building, because that building has some interesting physical features. And I think it's a great thing. You know, that's how we have to think, and we have to think proactively, and we have to encourage each other to think proactively and creatively, because this, if anything's taught us, is we have to be nimble, and change is constant. And the more we create that as part of our culture, I think the better we're going to be as a community and as a downtown. And you know, we need to encourage that across the board, from city leadership to employees, you name it. And I think the more we do that, the better. I'm not sure it's a long-term trend, but I see nothing wrong in the short term of helping our organization succeed that way. And I do want to end on one positive note. I believe you're going to see a real uptick in activity in the fall relative to the office market. My question will be, will that activity be a 10,000 square foot tenant going to 8,000 feet, or will be a 10,000 square feet staying the same or growing? And that's the trend that I don't know. In general, the large companies are looking at consolidation of relative to the things I talked about, but I think small and mid-sized tenants are the ones that are going to drive a lot of the things in Madison, not only downtown, but in the suburbs. So can we recruit smaller tenants to downtown that might have had bigger footprints in the suburbs? They may pay more per square foot, but they actually save money and take the benefit of downtown. So that's the thing I think I want to see, and I think we should focus on.
Excellent. I think we got time for one more question. Anyone else? If not, I have one in my head. Okay, same question, similar question that we asked Craig at the Nosh at noon, is we're seeing a large amount of development activity on the residential side downtown. My back of napkin math, I think we've got somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 units on the docket or in construction downtown. How will that affect commercial real estate?
In general, residential, retail and office follow residential. So in general, it's nothing but a positive. I think the interesting dynamic with new residential development is it a logical work from home environment? So single family homes tend to have larger spaces to work. I know there's been some surveys and details of what millennials versus Gen X versus boomers and how they feel about their work from home environment, not whether they like it, but is the environment conducive to getting things done? And millennials struggle with that. So apartments generally, on average, are not as big, don't have as good of things. So will they come back to work? I think it's nothing but positive, putting more housetops or residents downtown. I think that's going to help our overall market. So that's a direct answer, but there is some variability there.
You're so efficient with your answers, Craig. We have time for one more. You're so good at this.
It's not exciting stuff, but it's important stuff. So.
Anna, did you have a question?
Yeah, I like the conversational nature of this, and I hope other people feel free to chime in. I know we only have 5 minutes left, but feel free to raise your hand. I guess one thought, you know, the more you talk, the more ideas I have, Craig. You know, this idea of a third space, is there a third space streetery solution for this summer that involves officing outside? Jason, has that ever been brought up? Are there vacant restaurant spaces that offices could actually use to put tables out for their tenants to meet? That might be really too hard to manage with, you know, with non-tenants using those chairs. But that would be an interesting idea. Like if the the chairs at the top of State Street that Tiffany Kenny, the bid manage, if that could be reserved by an office as a third space.
You know, that's a good question. I have not heard that in any of the discussions, although 2 summers ago, there was an office company that came in and brought outdoor officing on the terrace that goes into the Monona Terrace. They were there for about a week. At DMI, we reserved it for a time period, and it was awesome. Admittedly, I got nothing done, board of directors, because I was just talking to people. Apologize to Jeff, to Ann, to Pam, to Janine, and everyone that's on the board. Nathan, you're the boss. But it really was a cool concept. But no, I think it could be something. I don't know, Craig, if you've seen other markets.
Actually, sorry, I'll jump right in. The one you're mentioning, the Parkify or whatever it was called, that might be a better solution to take up that parking space because there isn't a lot of parking demand, so that people could reserve a parking space, then they could manage it for that day with those kind of built-ins would be a cool thing to see.
I have not seen anything on that, Jason. It's interesting, but yeah, I'm sure the logistics are what Ann outlined are some of the challenges. And I'm really not surprised that you didn't get anything done and we're talking to people.
That's totally fair.
That is doing something.
I think that's where coffee shops come in too, Ann. Those are really, I mean, all the coffee shops we have, I often wonder why we have them, but it's because people like to go out and meet people at coffee shops and conduct their business there.
Ron, we got time for one more question.
This is a question for you, Jason. You know, typically when we had these kind of meetings 14 months ago, they would be at the Hovde building and they'd be in that small conference room. And when we've had these meetings, whether it's economic development or inclusiveness, we've had far more people attending than capacity allows in the Hovde building. So have you started to think about it? And are you going to look to maybe do some research with DMI members to find out what the interest is in returning to in-person meetings and where you're going to hold those meetings if they don't happen in the Hovde building's conference room?
Yeah, no, Ron, excellent question. We absolutely are thinking that through. Obviously, our plan right now is to work through the larger sort of happy hour events that, you know, get a lot of people at them, the new faces, new places, behind the scenes, and Nosh at Noons. Those will move first, but we actually want to move the committees as well. And we are looking at what that looks like, what spaces we want. Obviously, the Hovde building where we normally are is very tight. In fact, Ron, we moved this committee 2 years ago or so to the 25 West Main ULI's property, thanks to our friends at ULI and our friends at Old National Bank for that space. That gave us more legs. We also know that we're going to have to do a hybrid version. And in fact, Madeline and I were just talking about it yesterday and what that's going to require and to make sure, because I think that there is something with the committees on doing hybrid, but we really want to bring people back, right? Because I know the power of what it means. The perfect example of people connecting what that power means is our board of directors. We have to almost kick people out of our board of directors meeting like a half an hour later because so many people are having conversations after the meeting about deals, about family, about whatever. But that's where like the stuff gets done. And so we are committed to making sure we do that in a safe way and so that we bring people back as soon as we can. So that is our time today. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank Craig Stanley from Broadwing Advisors for the great presentation, great discussion. I want to thank all of you guys, to Jeff, to Ron, to Ann, Rebecca, Sue, Stacy, Narek, Bill, Nathan, Rob, and then Foster and Silas, most importantly, the winners of the day, the cat and the dog who enlightened us all. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you for being here. Again, our next event is going to be on Thursday, the 29th, the Madison Milwaukee Downtown Exchange. Join us at 8 a.m. And then next month on your calendars, I cannot remember the date. It's May something. 20th, something like that, with a great important speaker. We've got Dr. Ruben Anthony from our board of directors and the president and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Madison talking about the Black Business Hub on Park Street. Please make sure you attend that very important economic project. So we hope to see you all soon. Have a great rest of the day. And Craig, you are the best. Thanks, Ann. We'll see you guys soon.